One of the best gaming franchises of the last couple of years has been Insomniacs Spiderman franchise that started in 2018 with Marvel's Spiderman and then continued in 2020 with Marvel's Spiderman Miles Morales, which was more of a spin-off and a little bit lesser than a sequel. But in the next couple of years, we are expecting the release of Marvel's Spider-Man 2. I would speculate that it will most likely be 2023, but I don't think 2022 is out of the question. We know the game is currently under active development. We've seen photos from set of the actors doing motion capture for it. We know that the voice actors have begun doing work on the game, and it is expected that it'll be coming out pretty soon. And I would say it's probably one of the most anticipated games coming out in the next couple of years as well. I know it definitely tops my list, and in today's video, I want to do something a little bit more fun and do a story wish list and kind of predictions of what I want to see from the highly anticipated Marvel Spider-Man 2. Of course, I'm going to be taking some leaks and rumors into account, but take none of this information as being factual, considering it's just a discussion and me talking about things I would like to see and, kind of basing it off of some of the leaks that we have heard. And in the comments down below, I want to hear your guys' predictions or wish list for Marvel Spider-Man 2. It could be story related, gameplay related, or just something completely outlandish. I'm going to keep mine a little bit more grounded in what I expect could happen, but I want to hear your crazy theories and maybe your wildest hopes and dreams for the game. And of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And if you enjoy the Marvel Spider-Man 2 videos, make sure to smash the like button. It shows that you want to see more content like this, as well as it really helps out the video more than you could ever imagine. But let's get into my wish list for Marvel Spider-Man 2. Now, most of my wish list is going to be centered around the story aspects of Marvel Spider-Man 2. I am really interested in the gameplay and seeing how they will enhance it, because I felt they did that between Marvel Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, but truthfully, I already really like the gameplay within the game. It's similar to something like the Arkham games. I hope it's continually developed as the games go on. As you can see, like, Arkham Asylum's gameplay is not nearly as polished and nice as Arkham Knight's, but I really liked Arkham Asylum's, and I already really like Marvel Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, so there's nothing drastic I think they need to change there. So I think a lot of it is, for me personally, going to be story related. And when it comes to story, let's first off start with the villains, and my wish list for this is, first off, let's keep Green Goblin out of this game, and I think this game is going to heavily focus on Venom. Now, the reason I don't want Green Goblin in Marvel Spider-Man 2 is not because I don't like Green Goblin. Actually, he's my favorite Spider-Man villain, but I think the story makes much more sense to focus on Venom first, because he seems to have a direct relationship with Harry, and I think that overall motivation to cure Harry is what's going to push Norman down an even darker path like we've seen in the previous games, and kind of get him to that end conclusion of becoming the Green Goblin. And I think that's later saved for a third game, which would make sense, and I really do think we're going to be getting a trilogy of games. These games seem to be making a whole bunch of money, and they are doing really well critically, so I see no reason for there not to be a third game. And having Green Goblin and Venom in the same game, I think, is way too much. I mean, we are talking about two top 3 Spider-Man villains, and I think each of them would deserve their own kind of time in the spotlight as being the main villain of a Spider-Man game, similar to what Doc Ock was. And we know there were plenty of other villains within Marvel Spider-Man 1, the Sinister Six, for example, but a lot of those Spider-Man villains are much more like lower tier. I'm not saying there aren't good villains, but they're not typically the ones that you would expect to be leading a game and being the main villain of your game. And I understand that's arguable, because you can pretty much format any game to enhance any villain to create him to be the main villain of a game. But when we're talking about Green Goblin and Venom, those are two fan favorites, and I don't think you need to mash them together. And if Green Goblin was included, I feel like you'd be kind of rushed towards the end, and you really wouldn't get a whole lot of time with him. But Venom, I think, is a character that has a lot of really interesting, aspects that he could add to the story. First of all, I would really love to see Peter get his hands on the Black Symbiote, and that has been heavily rumored to be part of the game. And the combat is going to be completely changed and enhanced for when Peter uses the symbiote, and he's going to act differently and stuff like that. And I think that's really exciting, but I'm also really interested to see the dynamic between Peter and Harry. Now, we don't know a whole lot of that relationship. Of course, they've been friends for quite a long time, knowing that Peter is an adult, but I want to see more of that relationship explored. Will Harry become the Venom of this universe? Perhaps, or maybe they'll introduce Eddie Brock, who we know is within that universe, and maybe they'll do something completely different. Who knows? But I think Venom and the whole storyline between Peter and Harry, and also Norman trying to find a cure for his son, it sounds like something that is much more manageable in one game than also adding Green Goblin onto the end of it, which sounds like a lot. And yes, I understand video games are anywhere from like, 20 to 40 hours long through story content, but that's a big ask for a game. Now, I do not at all suspect that Venom would be the only villain within the game, and I think there's a lot of other villains that I would really love to see in terms of the story and potentially as side missions, which I'll talk about in a bit. But some of the villains that I think would be really awesome to see would be Mysterio, Sandman, Hydro Man, The Spot, Wraith, who we know is most likely going to be in this game as well, Morbius, and then also I think the Chameleon would be really awesome to include within this game. Now, one area that I think Marvel's Spider-Man could greatly improve upon between, even its first two games is the side missions, which I think were pretty bland and quite boring. The only one that I can really remember having much, story content to it, or at least the one that sticks out to me the most, was the Tombstone mission within Marvel's Spider-Man 1, but I really do wish they would put more emphasis on these side missions. I do understand they put a lot of villains within the main story and they're all intertwined together, but one thing that I thought was really great about the Arkham games, and I don't want to always compare it to the Arkham games, but when we're talking about the upper echelon of superhero games, it's just what it's going to be. Some of the best parts of those games were the side missions because they were little mini stories in their own right and were just as interesting, honestly, as the main story at points. And I'm not saying these have to be 3-hour-long mini quests within the game, just something, to keep you occupied if you want to say take a break from the main story and give you a reason to explore the rest of New York. And when talking about New York, there have been several rumors that the city within Marvel Spider-Man 2 is going to be the biggest yet created in any kind of, open world superhero game, which I think makes a lot of sense considering this game will most likely be geared for next gen. I'm not sure if it's going to be next gen exclusive, but most likely it's going to be kind of optimized for that. And there's a lot they could do with it. A lot of people really hope to see Queens in an even more expanded New York. Now, I think the open world is amazing as it already is, and I don't want to sacrifice, a greater area to explore for lesser detail. I do think detail is far more valuable than just having much, grander size to explore, but I would really love to see an enhanced and expanded New York. Another important point of discussion for Marvel Spider-Man 2 is how are they going to handle the two Spider-Man dilemma, and of course by two Spider-Man dilemma I mean that we now have two Spider-Man established within that Insomniacs Spider-Man universe, and I think it's a great problem to have, but a lot of people are wondering, is Marvel Spider-Man 2 going to be just specifically like 90% Peter Parker and we have some supplemental Miles Morales games within it, or is this going to be a two Spider-Man tale where we're, kind of more 50-50 and, switching between the two characters? Now, I think this game would do a little bit better of being somewhat of a 60-40 type of kind of split. Still a Peter Parker game for the most part, but there is no reason to not have a heavily influential Miles Morales part within this game. He is the other Spider-Man. If there's a bunch of shit going around in New York City and there's a bunch of villains running rampant, there's no reason for Miles Morales to not do anything. He is going to help. Now, I don't know if it's going to be something similar to, like, I don't know, Gotham Knights, where you get to switch between characters at your will, or the story dictates who you use. I think having the story dictate how you kind of which character you use would make more sense and would give Insomniac, I guess, more control. But I think this game could be a lot of fun if they added in a two-player co-op mode where you could play online with your friends and play through the story with your friends, one of you as Peter Parker and one of you as Miles Morales. And this seems to be something that's becoming a lot more popular within gaming now. For example, we know games like Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League are both going to have some sort of multiplayer mode so you could play through the story with friends, and I think it'd be really awesome. But if I had to guess, I'm assuming Insomniac is going to do a single player game and they kind of dictate who you use and when during the story, and they will have kind of their own little separate storylines within the game. Peter probably being more heavily focused on, Harry Osborn, Venom, Norman Osborn, and Miles Morales maybe being more focused on, I don't want to say side villains, but not the huge main villains of the game. And truthfully, when it comes to my wish list, that encompasses a lot of what I would really like to see in pretty much all of it. Of course, there are some crazy things I would love to see. I would love to see a crossover between Spider-Man or Daredevil, and maybe not, having Daredevil in a mission, but just seeing him on the rooftop of Hell's Kitchen, or maybe seeing another Avenger setting up a larger kind of Insomniac gaming universe. But right now, I think Spider-Man 2 has a lot on its plate, and if it's just a self-contained Spider-Man story, that's perfect as well, and I cannot wait to see what Insomniac is going to do. But again, in the comments down below, let me know what you want to see from Marvel Spider-Man 2. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash the like button. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in another video.